Hello, my name is Julian Gray. I'm on the faculty of the Peabody Conservatory in Baltimore, Maryland. I teach classical guitar. I'm very happy to be part of this symposium dealing with this important issue of student injury and how music educators can assist them in return to healthy play. One of the most important parts of our jobs as teachers and guides to our students' progress is to talk about effective practice organization, discussing tactics, strategies for learning that allows the student to be mindful and responsive to fatigue and issues of physical strain during practice that can be caused through either repetition of movements or the presence of too much work tension in those movements. No matter how vigilant and informed a teacher is in this kind of discussion, at some point, every teacher will confront a situation in which they're going to have to help a student who is in a situation of injury. Because this will happen, we need to know what we can do as music teachers to help mentor and guide our students back to healthy play. The most common type of injury that we usually have to deal with would be from overuse or strain of the muscles and soft tissues. A lot of times these injuries have a clear genesis, but sometimes not. One of the things that I do with my students is to talk about any change in their routine, either on the guitar or off the guitar, to look for a cause. I've noticed, for example, that at the end of semesters, when there's a lot more typing on the computer keyboard, that students can initially think that the cause was on the guitar, but really they're adding many more hours of other movements that add up to cumulative strain. If students are taught to respond to the pain and discomfort caused by overuse immediately and that they stop playing the instrument and using the affected hand, usually by following a few simple protocols that I'll be talking about in the next slide, within 2 or 3 days, these kinds of situations can resolve themselves relatively quickly, and actually this can become a teaching moment and an opportunity to either refine our movements of practice or practice organization to avoid future occurrences. Athletes, both amateur and professional, have to deal with injury and strain on a regular basis during practice sessions and competitions. For this reason, athletic coaches and trainers are usually better informed about injury first aid protocols as compared to music teachers and musicians. They're better informed because they have to be to keep athletes on the playing field. A student that has recently observed pain that lessens with immediate rest can benefit from some simple injury first aid protocols. In your handouts, you'll find the modified Price and Mice protocols that I've copied from an article by Sirop that appeared in a recent issue of Soundboard magazine. The basic principles behind Price and Mice is to help alleviate inflammation and facilitate tissue healing. I've used these myself to help fend off the effects of minor wear and tear from practice and performance, and I've seen many of my students benefit from the proper applications of these. But it's certainly the nature of overuse strain injuries with the incredibly complex and interrelated structure of the hand, arm, shoulder that the student's situation could take weeks or months to resolve. This presents very different challenges and potential obstacles that the teacher and the student are going to have to address. Because much of the sense of who we are is created by what we do, a musician who cannot play and who can no longer create sound on their instrument is really threatened in the most fundamental kind of way. In a sense, they've been ostracized from the very thing they love the most by their own bodies, and they have hearts and heads full of music that have been exiled to silence. And when this happens, certainly some combination of fear, guilt, anger, frustration, and self recrimination is not far away. If rest and following the Price and Mice protocols that were just described don't resolve the issue of pain, then after about 1 to 2 weeks, the job of the teacher really is then to direct the student into the medical community and to a doctor who can accurately diagnose what the injury could be, begin appropriate therapies. Medical issues, of course, can easily become very bewildering, and most music teachers are not medical professionals, so we don't want to overstep our bounds here. But it certainly is helpful, I think, for any music teacher to become knowledgeable about any musician's clinics or health and wellness resources that are in their area. And certainly, there's never been a time with all of the information on the internet where it's possible for us to collect this information. At the moment where both the teacher and the student realize that the injury is going to require a longer amount of time to heal and allow return to play, it's important to pause and take stock of the situation. The first thing that I think the teacher really needs to do is to help the student realize that at this point, their health is the most important issue for their long-term musical career, and that taking all of the necessary time to rest, slowly rehabilitate, trumps any institutional requirement, concert or audition demands, timelines for completion of any type of work, and that taking the time the body needs and requires to recover completely without haste or hurry is really the most important component to their successful rehabilitation. Of course, the nexus of the normal studio lesson usually centers on physical performance on the instrument and how the student performs as a final measure of the student's success in understanding and developing mastery of the concepts discussed in the lesson. For the injured student, this is not going to be occurring. I still think that at this point it's very important to continue regular weekly lessons. First, as mentioned before, the student is in a very vulnerable position psychologically, and to end lessons, I think, creates a sense of abandonment and really just validates the danger of their loss of identity as musicians. Also, it should be pointed out to the student that in reading interviews, articles, books, autobiographies of great performers, we can see how all of them bring to bear on their playing knowledge and experiences they have gathered off the instrument. With this in mind, the overarching concept of music study now within the weekly studio lesson for the non-playing student is to optimize this opportunity for artistic experience and music study, and to gather artistic insight that can be leveraged by the student when they return to play. Seen in this way, the weekly lesson is a continuation, indeed in some ways an amplification, of some of the most important artistic work that significant performers do. There are three valuable types of assignments that I think non-playing students can greatly benefit from. The first would be comparative listening assignments. Here a specific piece is determined, and then 3 to 5 different artists' performances are chosen to be listened to following the score. This really helps to emphasize to the student that artistic creation is about making choices and that the difference in the choices that we make can change the emotional atmosphere and also how the structure of the piece is explained and conveyed to the listener. Reading assignments in the pedagogical literature, both within the student's field but also for other instruments and voice, can truly help to expand pedagogical concepts, both of practice organization and efficient muscular movement. And then finally, the general literature of style and performance is, of course, inexhaustible, and the lists of books could be really unending. In addition to this, reading biographies and autobiographies of performers and composers and collection of interviews with performing artists are really excellent instruction for students to become aware of the trials, the difficulties that are faced by all artists, and the ways in which they've used adversity to become stronger artistic personalities. This also helps the student to feel like a fellow traveler with great musicians of the past. At the point that the student begins return to play in their lessons, it's very important that the teacher defines this first physical work not as practice, but as rehabilitation, and that the student understands it as such. After a longer physical hiatus from play, you really want to start with no more than 2 to 5 minutes a day of clearly circumscribed tasks, and having the student carefully monitor any sense of pain, discomfort, fatigue after they've done the work and in the few hours afterwards. Clear identification of movements that use more maximal types of work effort and potential strain are really to be avoided at this point, and the emphasis is on ease of movement and mid-range muscular function. From the very beginning of return to play, any types of ergonomic adjustments that we can make to our instruments that lessen the amount of physical work are very helpful to be incorporated. On the guitar, for example, that I deal with, I have my students change to low tension strings. I use a device called a capo, which you put across the neck, which effectively shortens the length of the strings and the necessity of the hand to expand to play the frets. And also we tune the strings down at least a whole step, all to minimize work tension. In addition, at this point, all of the ideas and concepts that were discussed in previous lessons about pedagogical texts can now be leveraged within the realm of the physical work that the student is now doing on the instrument. The use of non-legato playing, this would be portato, not staccato, as an environment to enhance the ability to learn how to constantly release work tension, would reinforce habits of efficient use of work. And of course, playing at softer dynamic levels also helps to eliminate unnecessary tension at this point. Of course, teachers are always trying to choose what they feel is the most appropriate repertoire for their students, but for an injured student in return to play, it's even more incumbent on the teacher to choose very specific lengths of pieces and categories of movements within pieces that are appropriate for the return to play student. In addition to this, the teacher should go through every piece in a very detailed way so that they can edit out any local maneuvers or gestures that will cause undue strain for a piece or within a piece that's really generally appropriate for the student. Injured students who successfully guide their practice in return to play all realize with much more vivid awareness the importance of the organization of practice time and the value of describing very clearly graded progressive tasks, both in protecting their achievements and continuing and completing their rehabilitation and return to play. Without exception, every injured student I have worked with has said that the experience of return to play after injury has profoundly and in a very positive and permanent way changed their idea of what effective and efficient practice consists of. As you're looking at this summary slide, I want to say what a pleasure it is to have been able, through the wonders of 21st century technology, to still be able to participate in this symposium, albeit from a distance, both spatially and temporally, and to give heartfelt thanks to my colleagues who are present for bringing their own valuable insights and experience to bear on the important issue. Thank you very much.